Welcome to the Crawlcast. I'm your host, George Krawczak, and this is what happened in Week 2 of the NFL season. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. Now let's get started. The first game was the Washington Commanders versus the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers won 27-18. So the Packers won 27-18 over the Washington Commanders. And the Packers' leading passer was Jordan Love, who had 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Josh Jacobs, who had 84 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Tucker Kraft, who had 124 yards and a touchdown. For the Commanders, their leading passer was Jayden Daniels, who had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was a tie between Austin Ekeler, Jayden Daniels, and Bill Krosky-Merritt, who all had 17 yards. And their leading receiver was Zach Ertz, who had 64 yards and a touchdown. So this game was very interesting because even though the score looked a little bit close at the end, this game was not close. It was domination by the Packers front and back, and especially by the Packers defense. So this is kind of interesting where let me just break it off into both teams. Kind of my takeaways is this Packers defense is legit. If you look at the Lions, and we'll get to that game in a little bit, but they held the Lions to 6 points until the very final minute, and then in garbage time they scored a touchdown. And then same with Commanders. So the Lions were the number 1 offense last year. Commanders were number 5 offense last year, and the Packers defense completely shut them down. And the thing that impressed me most is their pass rush was really good last week, and their corners did struggle when the Packers didn't get immediate pass rush against the Lions. The only thing about that is there was almost 0 plays where the Packers didn't get immediate pass rush against the Lions. Whereas this one, the corners actually held up really well. Keyshawn Nixon looked great. Nate Hobbs, there was a couple of bad plays, but he looked fairly decent. And the Packers pass rush looked unstoppable. Micah Parsons was unstoppable. Rashawn Gary was unstoppable. Lucas Van Ness was unstoppable. This Packers defense is legit. The Packers right now, I think them and the Chargers are probably the 2 best teams in the NFL. So with the Packers offense, they did slow down a little bit, and they're kind of getting the ball down the field, but they struggled to get in the end zone. Tucker Kraft looked amazing, and I just wish the offense would have played slightly better. But and again, they were dealing with a lot of injuries on the offensive line and on a short week. And this team is legitimate because what hurt them last year was 2 things. Number 1, they could not get to the quarterback with 4 pass rushers. Micah Parsons has completely solved that issue. The next thing is they struggled with drops, and Romeo Doubs had caught all his passes. Jayden Reed caught all his passes, and so there was zero how do I say this? There was 0 clear drops, and so clearly these wide receivers took it to heart that everyone was kind of mocking them and making fun of them, saying you can't catch the ball, and they couldn't. They couldn't catch the ball last year. They were terrible. And this game, they turned it around. Unfortunately, Jayden Reed did break his collarbone, so he is going to miss a significant amount of time. But if Wicks and Dobbs keep not dropping the ball and having those issues, that should be no problem for the Packers at all. And then for the Commanders, their defense looked fairly decent, and I think their defense is still good. They shut down the Giants last week, although I think that could have been Giants' incompetence, or it could have been great Commanders' defense. But what concerns me is their offense. Their offense did struggle against the Giants last week, and I think that is something to take note of. And Jayden Daniels and their offense struggled against the Packers this week. And so I think Jayden Daniels could be having a sophomore slump, kind of like CJ Stroud had, and kind of like Bo Nix is having as well. Um, and so that's something we just have to keep an eye on about Jayden Daniels. And again, this offense really concerns me. Austin Ekeler tore his Achilles, out for the season, and his career is probably over because he is old and he plays the running back position. And overall, just gotta be a little bit concerned about the Commanders, and the Packers look legit. They look like they're going to be one of, if not the best team in the NFL. And then I did see some places reporting, number 1, that they're looking to trade Malik Willis, and they might trade him, but that doesn't make sense to me. Unless you get a second round pick, which I don't think any team would or should give up a second round pick for Malik Willis. But he should not get traded because he knows the offense really well, and the Packers are kind of going Super Bowl or bust this year. And Malik Willis knows the offense, and just in case Jordan Love gets injured, you want Malik Willis on this team. So I do not think he will or should get traded. And then I also saw there's rumors that the Packers are extending Quay Walker. I don't think that's a good idea either because Edgerrin Cooper looks like a stud, and you're paying Micah Parsons a lot of money, and you have to make cuts somewhere. Unfortunately, I think Quay Walker is just one of those guys where he's just not in the budget because you have other pieces that you need to pay and extend. And with Edgerrin Cooper being a stud, just hope either Tyron Hopper or somebody you can find in the draft can replace Quay Walker. The next game is the New York Giants versus the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys won 40-37. So in this game, the Cowboys' leading passer is Dak Prescott, who threw for 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher is Javonte Williams, who had 97 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is CeeDee Lamb, who had 112 receiving yards. And for the Giants, their leading passer is Russell Wilson, who had 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Cam Skabodo, or Cam Scadabo, sorry, I mispronounced that, who had 45 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Malik Nabers, who had 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it was interesting because these two teams are kind of polar opposites, where in week 1, the Cowboys' offense looked great, but their defense struggled a lot. And in week 1, the Giants' defense looked great, but their offense struggled a lot. And then in this game, you had Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott both play fairly well. And the big news to me was Russell Wilson because, yes, the Cowboys defense is not very good, but Russell Wilson played horrible week 1, and he finally kind of figured it out. It was kind of weird because Jackson Dart, they did put him in for a series of plays, and I just thought that was kind of strange because I just don't think Jackson Dart should play, period. Because just have him sit, learn from Russell Wilson, learn from Jameis Winston, and then next year he can be ready to take over the reins. But overall, in this game, just the Cowboys' offense just looks spectacular. Devontae Williams looks really good because they had 0 running game last year. Dak Prescott looked good. CeeDee Lamb looked good. And this was a close game. It's just that Russell Wilson threw kind of a bad interception at the end in overtime. And Russell Wilson looked great, and there's no reason for Russell Wilson to get benched. He's definitely earned to be a starter for a while, and the O-line for the Giants is concerning, but sooner or later the Giants are going to put it all together. Week 1, the defense looked good, but the offense sucked. Week 2, the offense looked good, and the defense sucked. And so overall, the Giants are going to put it together sooner or later and win a couple games. I don't think they are a playoff team, but I do think they can be decent enough. And then the Cowboys. To me, this just shows how bad the Micah Parsons trade is that they have an elite offense. Their offense is ready to win, but their defense is just missing a key pass rusher like Micah Parsons. And you see if the Green Bay Packers, he is causing havoc, it feels like, almost every single play for the Green Bay Packers. And like the Cowboys, if their offense keeps this up and they had Micah Parsons, they definitely could be a Super Bowl team. It's just that their defense is holding them back too much that I don't know if they can win during this game or during this season. The next game is the Seattle Seahawks versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Seahawks won 31-17. So the Seahawks won 31-17. The Seahawks' leading passer was Sam Darnold, who threw for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Kenneth Walker, who had 105 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had 103 receiving yards. For the Steelers, their leading passer was Aaron Rodgers, who threw for 203 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Jaylen Warren, who had 48 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Jaylen Warren, who had 86 receiving yards. So in this game, it really felt like the Steelers were just a disaster. I don't think the Seahawks looked particularly impressive, but the Steelers fell apart. So there was one very horrible special teams play where I don't remember who the returner was, but he just let the ball go, and if the ball is kicked inbounds on a kickoff, it is a live ball. Anyone can pick it up and get it, and so the Steelers returner just ignored it, and then the Seahawks recovered a touchdown in the end zone. Aaron Rodgers, there was one interception where he threw where it just kind of bounced off the hands of Calvin Austin and then was picked. But overall, Aaron Rodgers did not play well this game. Like, again, that interception wasn't really his fault, and then the second one, he was just kind of throwing it at the end to try to make it close, but Aaron Rodgers did not play well. And then the big news of this is the Steelers' defense. The Steelers' defense looked terrible against the Jets, and they looked bad against the Seahawks as well. And so this is very concerning, especially a team that's also in a win now mode, because Aaron Rodgers, this is probably his final season, and then he's done after this. And so you are built for this, and this is how it's always been. Okay, terrible offense. You don't have a quarterback, but your defense carries you for the win. And they won games with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and other quarterbacks like that. And now that you have Aaron Rodgers, who again he did not play great this game. I want to emphasize that, but he has definitely played better than Kenny Pickett has ever played for the Steelers. And the Steelers defense is just now falling apart. The special teams isn't going well, and hopefully this is just one bad game for the Steelers that they want to forget. But if this is a sign for things to come, the Steelers seriously could be in trouble. And like I said, it's kind of just stupid mistakes, like the kickoff for the touchdown. Like that could be a game-changing play, and it was just not thinking. And then for the Seahawks, Sam Darnold, he didn't play terrible. He threw two bad interceptions, but other than that, like he's played okay. I don't again I don't know how much credit he deserves because that is an interesting thing about people talking about who is better for the Vikings, Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy. And JJ McCarthy has been terrible. We'll get to his game later, but Sam Darnold, I think he's been average. I think it's fair to say he's been average. His first game he wasn't pretty good, and this game, other than the two interceptions, he was fairly decent. But overall, the Steelers, it felt like they just kind of collapsed. That's just how it felt like during this game. So the next game is the Los Angeles Rams versus the Tennessee Titans, and the Rams won 33 to 19. So the Rams won 33 to 19. The Rams' leading passer was Matthew Stafford, who threw for 298 yards, two touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Kyren Williams, who had 66 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Davante Adams, who had 106 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Titans, their leading passer was Cam Ward, who had 175 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Tony Pollard, who had 92 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Calvin Ridley, who had 57 receiving yards. So in this game, it kind of went how you expected. The Rams looked good. Their offense played good. Their defense played good. And then Cam Ward didn't struggle as much as the first game, and I think that's a lot of credit to him. The offensive line for the Titans did not look great, but Cam Ward had probably the craziest first touchdown pass you'll ever see. He ran to the right and then threw across his body to the left and had perfect accuracy for the touchdown. That is an ill-advised throw, which will probably get picked off 99% of the time, but it was just a really, really good throw by Cam Ward. And so, like, there's not much to say about this game because it kind of went how you expected. The Rams look good. Their offense looks good. Their defense looks good. And then the Titans are struggling because I think the Rams are definitely a playoff team. I'm not sure if they're a Super Bowl team. I think maybe they're borderline on that. But they are one of the top teams in the NFL. And then I think the Titans are kind of one of the bottom, and they're not expected to be pretty good. And we'll just see what we got out of Cam Ward. But a lot of the times, rookies do not look good. So I think you can kind of give Cam Ward a little bit of a pass if he does look terrible, because that's what you expect out of rookies. A lot of rookies do not look good. So this game kind of went exactly how you expected. Cam Ward did play better than last week, so that does show improvement. But overall, just not much happened in this game. The next game is the Buffalo Bills versus the New York Jets. The Bills won 30 to 10. So the Bills won 30 to 10. The Bills' leading passer was Josh Allen, who threw for 148 yards. Their leading rusher was James Cook, who had 132 yards and two touchdowns. And their leading receiver was Jordan Palmer, who had 47 receiving yards. For the Jets, their leading passer was Tyrod Taylor, who had 56 passing yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Justin Fields, who had 49 rushing yards. Their leading receiver was Garrett Wilson, who had 50 receiving yards. So this was really like a come-down game for the Jets. I thought the Jets actually had a decent shot at winning this. I'd still pick the Bills, but I thought the Jets had a shot because of their insane rushing attack. Because a lot of NFL defenses do gear towards the pass because that's where you have your biggest big play potential, like a 30, 40-yard pass downfield, not necessarily through running the ball. And so a lot of defenses cannot handle the run. And I think that's why the Steelers struggled so much against the Jets. Whereas this game, it felt like the Jets were shut down in all facets of the football game. They could not throw, they could not pass, they could not run their offense. And then the Bills, they were just dominating their defense. That great Jets defense that, oh, actually, no, I don't want to say great Jets defense because they did struggle against the Steelers. They did play bad against the Steelers. But the Bills, they just dominated through the air. Didn't Josh Allen didn't do a lot, but on the ground, James Cook just carried the team. And so this is concern for the Jets, and Justin Fields did get injured. We don't know the status of his injury just yet, but overall, I don't think it really matters because this is the Jets team that we were all expecting. Just week one, it was just a shock at how bad the Steelers defense played. And I think that's still a lot of cause for concern because this great Steelers defense playing bad 2 weeks in a row is a scary thing. But overall, the Jets just had a come down to earth moment because Justin Fields throughout his career has not been a very good quarterback, and he was not playing very good until he got injured. Tyrod Taylor came in and played a little bit better, but that's not saying much. Overall, the Bills are just kind of on their way, looking great. Josh Allen's looking great. The whole offense is looking great. And then the Jets are struggling, and I think a lot of people expected this, where the Jets would not be a playoff team and would not be that great of a team. I think the last week just kind of mismanaged expectations, and now it's kind of getting back to reality. The next game is the New England Patriots versus the Miami Dolphins, and the Patriots won 33-27. So the Patriots won 33-27. The Patriots' leading passer is Drake May, who threw for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Ramondre Stevenson, who had 54 rushing yards. Their leading receiver was Ramondre Stevenson, who had 88 receiving yards. And for the Dolphins, their leading passer was Tua, who had 315 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Devon Achane, who had 30 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Tyreek Hill, who had 109 receiving yards. So in this game, both offenses actually looked pretty good. I think Drake May looked good. I think Tua looked good because that's the thing about Tua. I know he gets a lot of hate, but I don't think he's that bad of a quarterback. He's just good at running his style of offense. And then once you kind of get out of the quick release where, how do I say this, where it's kind of like Brock Purdy, where things are schemed up for him, and he's good at finding his first read and making the right decision, but once that is covered and he's forced to go to his second read, that's when he struggles. And I do think you shouldn't get hate for that, because just because you are good at running the offense doesn't mean you are a bad quarterback. It just means, hey, you use the tools that you're given with. So the Dolphins, their offense does seem to be back a little bit because that's always been the story of the Dolphins is their high-powered offense. But then their defense, it's terrible. It was terrible last week against the Colts. It was terrible this week against the Patriots. And I think that's a lot of cause for concern because this is just not a defensive team, and they don't really have a lot of defensive stars on the team. So I don't know if their offense is, again, this could be a little bit fluky because the Patriots defense didn't look that great last week either, but their offense does seem to be back. Tua does seem to be back. He threw one terrible interception, but other than that, he seems to be doing much better. And overall, this could go kind of either way. I think neither of these teams are playoff teams, and I think the Patriots are a little bit better, and they scored a little bit more points. But overall, you gotta be happy with Drake May playing well, because Drake May, because we've always given him a pass because he has been on a terrible team, even though he has not played well. And so, how do you credit that with, okay, not playing well, but everyone around him's terrible, so where does that land? But overall, Drake May played well, and that shows he does have potential for the future, but I think at this point, neither of these teams are playoff teams, and the Dolphins really need to fix something fast. So the next game is the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals won 31-27. So the Bengals won 31-27. The Bengals' leading passer was Jake Browning, who threw for 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Chase Brown, who had 47 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Jamar Chase, who had 165 yards and a touchdown. And then for the Jaguars, their leading passer was Trevor Lawrence, who threw for 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Travis Etienne, who had 71 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Parker Washington, who had 76 receiving yards. So the big story of this game is Joe Burrow got injured. and he has a severe turf toe injury, and it looks like he's going to get surgery, and he's going to be out for 3 months. So that's basically he's going to be out for the remainder of the season, and if the Bengals are a playoff team, he'll be back for the playoffs. And it's interesting because they are 2-0, so they do get credit for that, but they're not a convincing 2-0, and they're not playing good. They played horrible last week, and they didn't really play that great this week. And so here's the positives. They are 2-0. That's very good. Jake Browning, he played 2 years ago. He filled in for Burrow being injured, and he played fairly decent. In this game, he didn't play that great, but he did play good in the past. So that's where you are with that. But overall, the defense, I don't think is that great. The offensive line is terrible, and we'll see how Jake Browning can do. And then for the Jaguars, I kind of felt like they should have won this game. Trevor Lawrence made some boneheaded decisions, including one where he ran 5 yards past the line of scrimmage and then threw the ball. And then Brian Thomas Jr. He did not run his routes with full conviction. It felt like his heart wasn't in it. Slash, he just didn't try as hard, and that's going to be an interesting story because it feels like once someone has like one game off, that's just a pattern. We saw that with Chase Claypool, where once people started notice he was being a little bit lazy, and then that was the end of his career. So again, it's not something to worry about because I I hate to say I don't blame him because Trevor Lawrence is not a very good quarterback. I understand generational prospect, number one overall pick, and he almost will always have that potential. But at some point in the NFL, you have to say he's been terrible his entire career. And again, he'll always have that potential, but at what point do you say that potential goes away and he's just a below average, not very good quarterback? And then this is what I said Travis Hunter, interesting enough, he played both sides of the ball, didn't do anything on offense, played okay on defense. And that's how I felt about him going second overall. I didn't think it was a good move because now you have a guy where your second overall pick, and I think you want either a game changer on offense or a game changer on defense, not a guy who can play average on offense and can play average on defense. Just because it's cool that he plays both sides of the ball and saves you a roster spot there, but if he's only playing average on both sides of the ball, that's not a second overall pick worthy player to save one roster spot. That's kind of what I always said is like he's kind of good at both and master of none, where he is a good corner, he is a good receiver. He is not an elite corner and he's not an elite receiver. So I felt like that was a mistake, and I said it at draft time. I'm a Packers fan, and I saw that he was up, and I'm like, the Packers need a receiver, but I do not want the Packers to draft him. So overall, we'll see how the remainder of his career goes, but it's looking like that might have been a mistake for the Jaguars, and I just don't think the Jaguars are going to be very good, and we'll see how the Bengals do, because I do think Jake Browning is one of the more competent backup quarterbacks and can play well, but we'll see how this turns out for them. The next game is the San Francisco 49ers versus the New Orleans Saints. The 49ers won 26-21. So the 49ers won 26-21. The 49ers' leading passer was Mac Jones, who threw for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Christian McCaffrey, who had 55 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Juwan Jennings, who had 89 receiving yards and a touchdown. And for the Saints, their leading passer was Spencer Rattler, who had 207 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Alvin Kamara, who had 99 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Chris Olave, who had 54 receiving yards. So in this game, Mac Jones played really, really well, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And because he's finally in an offense that fixes kind of his issues. If you look at his first year in the NFL, he actually played pretty well because he was in a system that was designed for him to just read the defense and make the right decision. It wasn't designed for him to go off script and try to create a play where there isn't one. And this is where I think Mac Jones fits well. And that's what he excelled in his first year, where he will read the defense and he will make the correct decision. If you want him to go above and beyond, if you want to put on that like Superman cape, he will not do that, but he will play good enough to make the correct decisions. And that's kind of like the little bit of the debate with Brock Purdy, where that is what Brock Purdy will do, where he is good at reading a defense and making the correct read. Once he tries to go above and beyond that, that's when Purdy struggles a bit. And so I think there's a little debate on like how much of a super team plays versus the quarterback. And overall, with the 49ers, you have to be extremely, extremely happy because they are 2-0 and they are so beat up that you can think, okay, they'll only get better from here. Yes, they're against the Saints, who are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. But I think the Saints deserve a lot of credit, too. Their offense has looked fairly decent. I thought they were going to be the worst team in football. And Spencer Rattler, I thought he was going to be absolutely terrible because he was horrible last year. He was probably the worst quarterback in the NFL last year. And now he's looked competent. He looks good. He hasn't won a game yet, but he hasn't made some of those glaring mistakes that hurt him so much last year. So overall, with the Saints, you maybe have something with Spencer Rattler, probably not, but maybe. And then you have to be happy with Mac Jones because he is a competent backup quarterback that can play if Brock Purdy has to miss tons and tons of time. So we'll see how this goes if Mac Jones can keep it up. I think you have to be very, very happy if you're a 49ers fan, especially since they're 2-0. The next game is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens won 41-17. So the Ravens won 41-17. The Ravens' leading passer was Lamar Jackson, who had 225 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Derrick Henry, who had 23 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Zay Flowers, who had 75 receiving yards. And then for the Browns, their leading passer was Joe Flacco, who had 199 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was Quinshon Judkins, who had 61 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Jerry Jeudy, who had 51 receiving yards. So in this game, it kind of was very close throughout the entire game until at the end where the Ravens kind of blew them away. I think this is a big story about the Browns defense. The Browns defense has looked really good the last 2 games. They kind of dominated the Bengals, and they should have beat the Bengals. If it wasn't for a couple of missed kicks and a couple of drops, they would have beat the Bengals. And then this week, they kept it close against the Ravens. And that's what I've always said about the Browns is I thought their defense is good enough to win championships or make the playoffs and compete for a Super Bowl. But then if you look at last year, their quarterbacks were Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Jameis Winston. And I think they might have even had Tim Boyle. No, it was Bailey Zappi. They had Bailey Zappi. And those quarterbacks were just not competent enough to help win you almost any games, even with a strong defense. And so I was like, okay, now that Joe Flacco is back, they have this great defense. They should play at least a little bit better. Nope. Joe Flacco has been terrible. Okay, no, he's been terrible, I'll say it. He has not been a very good quarterback. And then Dillon Gabriel came in and he played pretty decent. So I don't know if it is time to bench Joe Flacco or not, because this is what I said again with the Jackson Dart scenario, where I don't think that the Giants should start Jackson Dart over Russell Wilson because of the idea that you need to sit a quarterback, because so many times the quarterbacks sit and learn the offense and sit and learn how to transition from college to the NFL. And so many quarterbacks have talked about how much it helped them with, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love. All these quarterbacks sat their rookie seasons because they need to sit down and learn so much. Maybe the Browns are in a different scenario where the Giants aren't really in a win now mode, and I don't think they have a good shot at making the playoffs, but maybe the Browns are, because it seems like they are a quarterback away from playing decent. Their defense has it. Their defense largely shut down the Ravens, not completely, but largely shut them down. And maybe Dillon Gabriel is that spark that the offense needs. Maybe not. Maybe he's terrible and Joe Flacco's the answer, but it feels like the quarterback is really holding them down. And then the Ravens got to be happy with a win. Lamar Jackson played pretty decent, but again, the Browns completely shut down the running game, held Derrick Henry to 23 yards, held Lamar Jackson to 13 yards. The running game was non-existent, and that's a little bit worrying, but it's the Browns' defense. So Ravens, you gotta be happy with a win, and it's a win over your division opponent. And then the Browns, the offense needs a spark, and something needs to change, and Joe Flacco simply just needs to be playing better. Because the Browns have been in almost every single game, it feels like, and their defense is good. Their offense just needs to play a little better. The next game is the Chicago Bears versus the Detroit Lions, and the Lions won 52-21. So the Detroit Lions won 52-21. The Lions' leading passer was Jared Goff, who threw for 334 yards and 5 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Jahmyr Gibbs, their leading rusher was Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 94 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. For the Bears, their leading passer was Caleb Williams, who had 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was DeAndre Swift, who had 63 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Rome Odunze, who had 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this game says the Lions' offense is back. So that it's good and bad for the Lions. It's essentially good for the Lions saying, okay, it is not the coordinators who are the problem. It was the Packers who are the problem. So that's good for the Lions saying, okay, they still have an elite offense and they still are really good. It's bad for the Lions because it says, okay, their division opponent can completely dominate you. And that's a negative thing because that's something I predicted in my predictions video is I thought the Packers and the Lions kind of swap places where the Lions were the elite team last year and the Packers could beat every single team except for the elite teams. If you ignore the Bears game, which they lost to the Bears, but they also played their backups, so it's kind of how much you want to take that into account. But they lost to the Eagles twice, Vikings twice, and the Lions twice. But they beat all other teams. And then, so I think the Lions and Packers just swap places where now the Packers are the elite team, and the Lions are the good team that can beat everybody except for the Packers, who are their elite team. So that is an interesting thing where, again, the Lions' offense is back. And then for the Bears, this is worrying. They are like the first drive champions. This literally the same thing happened last week. Is in the first quarter they looked really, really great, and then they proceeded to suck the rest of the quarters. And it's worrying because their defense is not very good. Yes, they're suffering with a lot of major injuries, but their defense is not very good. And then Caleb Williams at the start of the game looked really, really great, and then kind of fell apart throughout it. And I don't have an explanation for that. I think it's good news in the sense where it's proof of concept because Caleb Williams can look good and can run the offense well for one quarter, but how do you get past that and translate that into an entire game? And I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. But again, for the first two first quarter last week and first quarter this week, Caleb Williams has looked really, really great. Beyond that, he's been not very good. And so I don't know what the solution to that is. And a couple of things I want to address as well. So Isaac Tesla, insane one-handed catch. That's all he does, just insane one-handed catches. He'll have one every single game. And then there's a play that I did think screwed the Bears a little bit. I don't think it ended up really mattering, but so right before half, Tesla catches a ball and he's down inbounds and then kind of rolls out of bounds. What should have happened is down in bounds, then clock runs, Lions try to spike it, and they run out of time, so they go to half because the Lions didn't spike it enough in time. And what happened is the ref incorrectly called Tesla out of bounds, and then they had the clock stop, and then the Lions had enough time to get the play back. So I think that was messed up by the refs, and the Lions went for the touchdown after that and got it. So I do think that was a mistake by the refs, and the Lions should not have gotten that touchdown. But again, it ended up not really mattering because the Lions dominated anyways. It's hard to take from this because I do think the Lions' offense is back. I don't think they are going to be as dominant as they were last year. Number one, because that was the second most points ever in NFL history. Although they did get an extra game, so I think you have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt in the sense that they did have an extra game to score points. But second most points scored of any offense, so that's almost impossible to replicate. And I think the Bears' defense is really back, or is really bad. But at least this shows the Lions can play well and can win. Because I think there was a big question about that, where Jared Goff, I think it was like he was 3-19-1 under offensive coordinators that were not Sean McVay or Ben Johnson. And so this shows Jared Goff can win and can play well with a new offensive coordinator. So they'll have to sustain this for future weeks, but I think this is very good news for the Lions. And just the Bears just continue to play bad. And again, they have the tools there. They just need to get it for a full 4 quarters, and I don't know how to do that for them. The next game is the Denver Broncos versus the Indianapolis Colts, and the Colts won 29-28. So the Colts won 29-28. The Colts' leading passer was Daniel Jones, who threw for 316 yards and 1 touchdown. Their leading rusher was Jonathan Taylor, who rushed for 165 yards. And their leading receiver was Tyler Warren, who had 79 receiving yards. For the Broncos, their leading passer was Bo Nix, who threw for 206 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was J.K. Dobbins, who rushed for 76 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Troy Franklin, who had 89 receiving yards and a touchdown. So the Broncos should have won this game, plain and simple. So what happened is that the Colts were going for the game-winning field goal. Their kicker missed, but then the Broncos had a penalty, and then the Colts kicker went for it again and made the field goal. So this is kind of interesting for both teams because this felt like a prove-it game for both teams, where Bo Nix played horrible last week. He did not play well, and the expectations were for him to play well, and he just didn't, plain and simple. And then Daniel Jones, now he's against a real defense of the Broncos. Can he sustain this? Well, yes, he can. This Colts offense has been really good, and I think is really good. Their defense is a little bit lacking, but I think their defense can play good enough to have a good season. It's just that last year, again, when I said about not having a quarterback for the Browns, they had Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, and they were still in almost every single game. So it just showed, okay, once you have at least semi-competent quarterback that can run the offense, this team can play really, really well. And so I do think that the Colts can sustain this. I do think they will be a playoff team. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team, but I think they'll be a playoff team. And then Bo Nix, he played pretty well. I do think he needs to play a little bit better. There was a bad interception, although I saw some places that said it was tipped. It might have been tipped. It's a little bit tough. And then the Broncos defense needs to play better. The Broncos defense was elite last year, was by far the best part of the team last year. And now the Broncos defense struggled this week, and they struggled last week as well. And so the Broncos defense definitely needs to play better, but again, at least Bo Nix played fairly decent, and the Broncos should have won this game. I know it's a loss on the scoreboard, but it feels like the Broncos shouldn't have really treated this as a loss because they should have won. And then the Colts, you won, you're 2-0. Offense is looking amazing. Defense needs to be slightly better, but overall looking really, really great for both teams. The next game is the Carolina Panthers versus the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals won 27-22. So the Cardinals won 27-22. The Cardinals' leading passer was Kyler Murray, who threw for 220 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was James Conner, who rushed for 34 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Trey McBride, who had 78 receiving yards. For the Panthers, their leading passer was Bryce Young, who had 328 yards and 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was Chuba Hubbard, who had 38 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Ted McMillan, who had 100 receiving yards. So in this game, the Cardinals' defense dominated for the entire game. Right at the end, the Panthers kind of almost came back and made it a little bit close, but a lot of that felt like it was in garbage time. But the Cardinals defense is legit, and they played well last week against the Saints, and they played decently well against the Panthers this week. But it's tough because those are the 2 worst teams in the NFL. And so you played good against bad teams, plain and simple, and you do deserve credit for that. The Cardinals offense definitely needs to play better and just overperform. And then the Panthers. Bryce Young, it's tough for him because I feel bad for him in the sense where he has not. This is kind of what I said about Drake May. Bryce Young has not played well, but also everyone around him has not been playing well either. It feels like other than Ted McMillan, he has no receivers. His offensive line is terrible. Doesn't have much of a run game and doesn't have much of a defense. So overall, I don't know where we go from here, and it'll be interesting that Bryce Young, it feels like, is kind of still playing to save his career. And we'll see where it goes from here. But other than that, this game has kind of ended how you expected. The Cardinals are the better team, and they should have won, and they did. The next game is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles won 20-17. So the Eagles won 20-17. The Eagles' leading passer was Jalen Hurts, who had 101 passing yards. Their leading rusher was Saquon Barkley, who had 88 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Devonta Smith, who had 53 receiving yards. And for the Chiefs, their leading passer was Patrick Mahomes, who had 187 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was also Patrick Mahomes, who had 66 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Travis Kelce, who had 61 receiving yards. So this is definitely a defensive game. Neither offense looked particularly impressive. And the Eagles' offense did struggle quite a bit. And it's kind of interesting because the Chiefs' defense, at least they're back. That's what's good about them. Where I think I do give the Chargers more credit, where I think it was more the Chargers being elite. But if you look at the past couple of years, Patrick Mahomes has not been winning or leading the Chiefs to great regular season game wins. It's been the defense and Patrick Mahomes playing well enough to effectively not blow it. But the defense has been elite at stopping teams, and that's what they've been doing here. And then the Chiefs offense just kind of struggled, and the Eagles defense played well. So what are these causes for concern for me? Number one, well, Travis Kelce. He did bobble a pass, and it got intercepted. And then there was one route where it looked like he kind of held up and gave out in the middle of the route, which could have been led to a big play, maybe a touchdown. And then he also took out Xavier Worthy, so he's been having a rough time. The Chiefs' offense does give a lot of cause for concern. They don't really have a number one guy. Travis Kelce is old, and he's just not really that guy anymore. And so they don't have a guy like that. And maybe it can be Tyreek Hill. I don't know. And we don't have a timetable on when Xavier Worthy will return. Uh, Rashee Rice is still out for 4 games, so that's still a long ways away for him. But at least the defense is elite, and you can rely on Patrick Mahomes to just play well enough to win. And then for the Eagles, that's also another concern for me. Jalen Hurts, he has not been playing very well, but they don't need him to play well to win. And that's kind of what I talk about with Brock Purdy as well, where Jalen Hurts does deserve credit in the sense that he does run the offense well. And I don't know why he deserves hate from that, because this is how I feel. Is he on a super team? Yes. Does he have one of the best receiving corps? Yes. Does he have the best offensive line? Yes. Does he have the best running back? Yes. Does he have one of the best defenses? Yes. So, can you say almost any quarterback can succeed in that? Yes, I think almost any quarterback can succeed in his position and probably play better than him. But he does deserve credit for playing well enough to win. Or look at, for example, the 49ers, where yes, Brock Purdy had all this stuff around him with a great defense. Trent Williams, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. But Trey Lance did not play as well as Brock Purdy in the offense. So Jalen Hurts does deserve credit for playing well enough to win. But that does give me cause for concern as let's say the defense struggles. Let's say they start giving up a lot of points because they got lucky with drops. The Cowboys should have scored more points last week than they got, and that's because the defense should have given up quite a few huge plays, and the Cowboys dealt with drops, especially from CeeDee Lamb. So let's say their defense struggles to come out the gate and stop the offense of the team they're playing. Does that mean the Jalen Hurts and the offense is good enough to make up for that? I don't know. That's a lot of concern for me. And then another thing I want to address is the tush push. I do think it is getting a little bit ridiculous where the refs just need to call out penalties. If you look at the two guards, the left and right guard, they are clearly moving before the snap. And then if you look at the center, he is so far over the football, you can't even see the football anymore. Those are penalties in the NFL, and the refs need to start calling them. And I'm fine with the tush push. I actually don't think it should be banned because it can be stopped, even though it's hard to. It can be stopped. I just think, okay, if there's a penalty call, it reminds me of like when Jawan Taylor kept going off sides for the Chiefs, and everyone kept saying, look, he's going off sides, and the refs just refused to call it. And then eventually the refs did. So I wonder if the refs will have a meeting like this weekend and be like, okay, now we're going to call it and kind of correct this, but something needs to happen. The next game is the Atlanta Falcons versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Falcons won 22-6. So the Falcons won 22-6. The Falcons' leading passer was Michael Penix Jr., who had 135 passing yards. Their leading rusher was Bijan Robinson, who had 143 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Drake London, who had 49 receiving yards. For the Vikings, their leading passer was J.J. McCarthy, who had 158 yards and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Jordan Mason, who had 30 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Justin Jefferson, who had 81 receiving yards. So in this game, J.J. McCarthy did get injured, and it will be Carson Wentz probably playing for the next 3 to 4 games. That's kind of interesting because J.J. McCarthy has been terrible. I think that needs to be said. I did pick the Vikings to win because I thought maybe J.J. McCarthy turned a new leaf, where the first 3 quarters last week, he was horrible. And then the fourth quarter, something turned, and he was playing great. And then now we get back to here, he's starting to play horrible again. This is concerning for the offense. At least they'll have Carson Wentz, and I don't think Carson Wentz is much of an upgrade over J.J. McCarthy, but it can't be much of a downgrade, honestly, because J.J. McCarthy has been playing that bad. And that worries me for the future of the Vikings, because if you want to win, you need to have a good quarterback. And I don't even want to say good quarterback. I'll say average quarterback, because the Vikings defense is good enough where all J.J. McCarthy has to do is play average, and he can't even do that. And then for the Falcons, Michael Penix Jr. really didn't play that great, but Bijan Robinson is legit and one of the best running backs in the league, and he deserves credit for that. So can the Bijan basically sustain the offense? I don't know, maybe. It's tough to have your entire offense go through one running back, but Michael Penix Jr., as long as he plays a little bit better, then he should do great. And then the Falcons defense, it's tough because I don't think their defense is particularly that great. I think it was more the Vikings offense being so unbelievably terrible under JJ McCarthy, but the Falcons do seem at least a little bit promising, and at least they're in a terrible division that's mostly open, although you have to worry about the Buccaneers. And so this should be interesting how the Falcons do for the future, but their offense I think is decent. Their defense concerns me a lot, and then the Vikings. I think their defense is great, but their offense is just unusable. We'll see how Carson Wentz does in the next couple of weeks, but JJ McCarthy is definitely concerning for a first-round draft pick. The next game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Houston Texans. The Buccaneers won 20-19. So the Buccaneers won 20-19. The Buccaneers' leading passer was Baker Mayfield, who threw for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Bucky Irving, who had 71 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Mike Evans, who had 56 receiving yards. For the Texans, their leading passer was C.J. Stroud, who had 207 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Nick Chubb, who had 43 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Nico Collins, who had 52 receiving yards and a touchdown. To me, the story of this game is the defenses and the offensive line. Both offenses struggled a lot. The Texans offense, after the first drive where they scored a touchdown to Nico Collins, they did absolutely nothing. Actually, that might not have been the first drive, but after they scored a touchdown to Nico Collins, they did absolutely nothing. And then the Buccaneers, they played fairly well, but their offensive line really just struggled to hold up. And so I think it was more of the Texans defense is really good and elite, and then their offense is not very good and struggling. I don't know what's up with CJ Stroud and why he can't do better, but he just keeps struggling. Again, it is the offensive line, and again, CJ Stroud isn't the only one to blame, but he certainly does need to play better. And then Baker Mayfield also got injured in this game. We don't know what it is, if it's severe or anything like that. He did finish out the game, but he did get injured, and so overall, this was a close game. I think the Buccaneers' offense does leave a lot to be desired. I think Baker Mayfield can play better, but I think the Buccaneers are a good team. And then the Texans, their defense is elite, and I think their defense can be one of the best defenses in the NFL. Their offense just needs to play better. C.J. Stroud struggled a lot. Nick Chubb, he had a couple of nice runs, but overall didn't do a lot. And just overall, the offensive line and C.J. Stroud needs to play much better for the Texans. The final game of the week was the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Chargers won 20-9. So the Chargers won 20-9. The Chargers' leading passer was Justin Herbert, who threw for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Justin Herbert, who had 31 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Quentin Johnson, who had 71 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Raiders, their leading passer was Geno Smith, who had 180 yards and 3 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Ashton Jeanty, who had 43 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Jacoby Myers, who had 68 receiving yards. So this game, Justin Herbert looked really, really good. So they got up early, and then they kind of took their foot off the gas and just tried to waste time. Their running game was non-existent for the Chargers, but overall, Justin Herbert looked really, really good. And honestly, right now, I'd say he's probably the favorite to win MVP. You have him, you have Lamar. I think Jordan Love can probably be in that conversation. Josh Allen for sure, but Justin Herbert is definitely in that conversation of being MVP as of right now. And so they got up early and then kind of took the foot off the gas. Quentin Johnston looked great, except for he did have a couple of drops, which I thought he figured out his drops issues because last week he was great, but ended up not doing too great this week. And then Geno Smith, he struggled a lot. And this is kind of unacceptable because I don't even think the Chargers defense was particularly that great. I didn't think he was particularly under pressure. He was just struggling at reading the defense. He threw 3 interceptions. And then on 4th down when he was trying to make a comeback, he just threw the ball away instead of even trying to force it somewhere. And so overall, just the Raiders, I think, are in trouble. Geno Smith was okay last week. And I'm not saying necessarily they're doomed, but their defense needs to step up. Their defense was terrible, and their offense was terrible, and they just need to play better. And I think the Chargers are one of the best teams in the NFL. So that's what happened in week 2 of the NFL season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who'd you like, who'd you didn't like? And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money, and I'll see you on the next one.